a little bit early. I'm going to go through all these posters again. Not because Frankie and Anoop didn't do a good job, they did a great job. It's because I want you guys to really understand these posters because they're probably going to comprise up to maybe 50% of your next test. Okay, so usually we're like, know your cadavers, they're super important. Still know them, there will be cadavers, but this one is the poster test, okay? We don't usually have this many posters showing up on the test. The main reason for that is pretty much what Anoop was saying. This model, it shows you like half of what you need to know. Okay, so the actual ear anatomical model is not all inclusive of all the inner workings of the hearing system. All right, so you're getting about maybe a little bit more than half, maybe like 60% of your terms on this one model. If you really want to go to all the terms that you need to know, you're gonna have to go to a poster. All right, so I'll go over all these posters again. Don't worry, guys. Don't need to freak out about that. But before we get to the brain, there is one thing I want to go over. Okay, it's going to be your pharynx. Okay, your pharynx is your throat. All right. So the pharynx, if you guys look on your syllabus, all the way at the end where it says pharynx, they have a whole bunch of stuff in there about your tonsils and these folds in your mouth. We don't need to know those. Okay, that's really not worth it. What I do want you guys to know is going to be this box right here. Okay, A, B, and C. That's pretty much all you need to know for this exam. So once again, if you're looking at your syllabus, you're going to see like the last paragraph, I think, of this last unit is like your tonsils and your folds in your throat. And I could tell you guys all that, but you don't need to know it, so it's really not important, I think. So we have the box here of our nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. Those pharynxes, I guess is plural, those are the regions in your throat. Okay, and that A, B, and C is coordinating with here. This A is your nasopharynx. It's the throat behind your nose. This B is your oropharynx. It is the throat behind your mouth. Oro for mouth. All right, and then we have C down here. Once we get underneath this cool little funky guy, that's your epiglottis. Remember, it's the flap that covers your trachea or your esophagus. We are now in the laryngeo for larynx area of our pharynx. So laryngopharynx. Laryngopharynx has a second name. Okay, this is a synonym that I want you guys to know. It's on the board. It's going to be called your hypopharynx. Okay, so laryngopharynx equals hypopharynx. That's a multiple answer question if that comes up. Okay, if Dr. Sam is feeling nice, which he usually does, it'll say laryngopharynx in parentheses hypopharynx. Okay, because he's done that before. All right, so nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. It's really kind of all I want you to know for this. Okay, that's in the 3 years that I've been here, that's all I've really ever seen come up on the test. There is one more thing that I do want you guys to know in this kind of pharynx or kind of mouth cavity. The hard palate is going to be the top of your mouth. Okay, you can run your tongue up along this hard palate. The further back you get with your tongue, you're going to get into that soft tissue. It's called your soft palate. What's the very tip of the soft palate called? Your gag reflex. It's called your uvula. Good job, guys. It's called your uvula. Okay, I've seen that come up, I think, when I did this class, but I haven't seen it since then. Okay, so hard palate, soft palate, and uvula. If we have time at the end, we can go over the tonsils. It'll be super fun. But if not, that's something that you can just review on your own if you want to. Like I said, I don't think it's super important for this lab exam. Maybe know it for lecture. He will go over it in lecture, though. Okay. And there is one thing I want you guys to know for lecture when it comes to that pharynx. All right, so I'm not going to go over it too much in depth, but it is lecture-based. The picture of the folds that are in your mouth. So, if I can find it. If you guys look in your lecture book, I don't know what page it's on, there's a picture of the mouth that looks kind of like this. Okay, this is a view that I want you to know because that could possibly come up on your lecture exam. Okay, Dr. Sam will tell you, obviously, the pictures that he wants you to know. For lecture, he'll tell you in class. I want you guys to get a head start, though. So make sure that you understand this. You understand the different folds that are going. And those folds, I mean the folds here where your tonsils are. You have different folds in your mouth. Okay, so if you just Google, like this is palatoglossal fold, one of the folds I want you to know. This is a pretty good one. You have your palatopharyngeal fold and your palatoglossal fold. Those are two folds that come up quite frequently on your lecture final exam through a picture that looks just like this. Okay, so whatever's in your book, I couldn't find the page of it earlier. That's what you want to know when you guys are studying for your final, for lecture. All right, so does anyone have any questions on the pharynx? Remember, naso, oro, laryngeo / hypo. Pretty much all you really need to know. You didn't get that from me. All right. So let's do the brain. Let's start with the model, and then we're going to go into the poster. The brain is complex, okay? It's pretty much learning a new language. Go back to how horrible the muscles were for most of you, I know, and you learned pretty much Latin. It's how it's going to be when we do the brain. Okay, so a lot of these terms are going to be a little bit new, a little bit complicated. I don't have too many tricks for everything. I'll try my best to make it make sense and to repeat myself and make sure that you guys have it clicking in your head. But if not, make sure you tell me and I can slow down and we can redo it. This will take me probably the next hour. Okay, so I'm going to probably go until maybe about 7:30 on the brain and then use that last half an hour before you reach 8 o'clock to go over all the posters again. All right, so here's a brain. From the side, it looks like this. Okay, from the front, I'm going to always have it this way. I don't know why I really like it oriented this way, and that this is anterior down here towards the bottom. This is posterior up here at the top. Okay, so this is the back of the brain. The back of the brain. This is the front of the brain. The cool thing about the brain is that all of the different lobes that we need to know correspond to the lobes or the bones that we saw within the skull. Okay, so if we think back to the skull, which I know is forever ago, it's a different lifetime ago, you probably already pushed it out of your head, and we point to the front here of our brain. What do you think that front lobe is called? Frontal lobe. You guys remember the frontal bone in your skull? Kind of? Okay, so this is going to be called our frontal lobe. What do you think we're calling this back lobe?
Occipital.
Occipital lobe. Good job, guys. Here we have what lobe?
Parietal.
Parietal. What's down here? Temporal. Okay? Perfect. Those are the lobes of the brain. Now, underneath here, all of this pink stuff, we have something that looks like a walnut. If you look at it from the back, it looks like two walnuts. That's the butt of our brain. The butt of our brain is called our cerebellum. Okay, so the cerebellum is the bottom. Again, the cerebellum is the bottom. Okay, do not get that confused with all of the pink worms up here, all this pink flesh, that brain tissue. That's called our cerebrum. Okay, so cerebrum, cerebellum is the bottom. Cerebrum, cerebellum. Not so important for anatomy. I don't think Dr. Sam does this, but I do know that in neurobiology and his neuroanatomy class, Dr. Sam likes to quiz you. Do you know the difference between the cerebrum and the cerebellum and what they do? Fun fact, the cerebellum down here is going to be in control of all your motor functions, okay, so your fine motor skills. So when you guys take this test next week, and then the following week you have your finals, or whenever you guys have your final, depending if you're on in the 8:30 or 7:30 lecture, you go out after, you go to Bar Louie, you have one too many drinks if you're 21 or older. This is going to be the organ that is going to be impaired first. Your cerebellum. That's why usually you can't walk that straight line or touch your nose with your finger. That's because your fine motor skill control center, your cerebellum, is affected. Okay? And there is a term I want you guys to know. I wouldn't worry about knowing how to say it or spell it because this is more for lecture. It is a clinical point in your book. There's this crazy term that I just learned how to say called dystidocockinesia. I think that's how you say it. So it's called dystidocockinesia. You're going to see it in your book. It's a clinical point. I like explaining it because it's pretty cool. So if you have any type of injury to your cerebellum, this disorder, dystidocockinesia, can develop in that you can't do alternating movements that are antagonistic to one another. Meaning that if I had this disorder, would not be able to go from supination to pronation and back. I wouldn't be able to repeat this, which is the craziest thing in my head, because I've never seen anyone not be able to do this. So if you ever want to look it up on YouTube, I haven't done that yet. It'd be a weird disorder to look at. Okay, so you wouldn't also be able to move your arm up and down for abduction and adduction. Okay, I think another one that might be inclusive in this would be like blinking one eye from the other. Okay, so that's this dystidocockinesia. I don't remember, I'm being honest, I don't remember if it comes up on your lecture final or not, but it is a clinical point in your book. Okay, and it's just kind of a cool clinical point. So you can go sit around with all your friends and be like, oh, dystidocockinesia, and sound all smart. Alright, so that's your cerebellum. Really nothing else to talk about with the cerebellum, it's just that. Okay. Back up on the cerebrum. Remember if we went back to the skull a little bit, we had all those sutures. We had all those different bones. We're suturing them together. How it works in the actual brain on the cerebrum is that we have something called fissures and sulci. Okay, sulci is plural for sulcus. You guys remember way back when we went over the spinal cord and there was a fissure and a sulcus, and my trick for a fissure was you want to go deep sea fishing in a fissure. So fissures are usually deeper. Alright, so this deep groove right here, this deep fissure, is very long, and it separates the cerebrum into two different hemispheres, okay, the right and the left hemisphere. So this very long fissure is called the longitudinal fissure. So think of like longitude and latitude. This is called our longitudinal fissure. our longitudinal fissure. Okay, once again, it's going to separate the brain into the right and the left hemispheres. Specifically, we're looking at the cerebrum. Okay, fancy word for the cerebrum that you will not see in lab, but you will see in your lecture book when you're reading, and I don't want anyone to freak out when they see this. It's called the telencephalon. The telencephalon. That term will not show up on lab. That's just when you're reading, if it's ever referring to the telencephalon, it's the fancy pink mush. Okay, that's your cerebrum. So we call that the longitudinal fissure. If we turn it to the side, we can see this deep groove right here. Here's another fissure. That fissure is called our lateral fissure. Our lateral fissure. Okay? The lateral fissure is easy to remember because you have one on either side. So they are laterally on your brain. So you have a lateral fissure here and a lateral fissure on the other side right here. It is separating the parietal lobe from the temporal lobe. Okay, just on either side right there. So lateral, like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So on the PowerPoint it says
Sulcus?
lateral sulcus.
Yeah. Fissure and sulcus is, he will never ask you, is this a fissure or a sulcus? So don't worry about that. I don't know what it is for sure. I thought it was a fissure. I learned it as a fissure. If the PowerPoint says sulcus, go with sulcus. But someone pointed out that to me yesterday, and I was like, oh well. You guys are fine. Don't worry. He will never point you and be like, is this lateral fissure or lateral sulcus? He won't do that. But good question. Okay. Now on the back here, we have this deep groove here, this fissure. This fissure, along with the longitudinal fissure right here, kind of makes the lowercase t letter. Okay, so this fissure that separates the cerebrum from the cerebellum, the bottom of the brain, is called the transverse fissure. The transverse fissure. So longitudinal fissure, transverse fissure, lateral fissure / sulcus. Okay. All right, so those are going to be all the grooves that we need to know on the outside. Okay, there is one more that we need to go over. It's right here in the middle. That's going to be number 5. That guy right there is called our central sulcus. It's a little bit more shallow than all our fissures. Okay, it's going to be called our central sulcus. Okay, the central sulcus, you look at it, kind of in the center of the brain. It's flanked on either side by 6 and 7. Those fancy little pink worms, they're called a gyrus. Okay, so plural, they're all gyri. Singular, they're called a gyrus. So number 6 and number 7 are the main gyri I want you guys to know. Number 6 is on the anterior side of the central sulcus. So we call it the precentral gyrus. The precentral gyrus, which would make 7 the post-central gyrus. So that should make sense. Precentral, post-central. Okay, and that fancy word at the end is gyrus, J-Y-R-U-S. Okay, so precentral, post-central. That's easy. You look at it, it's 6 and 7. Everyone can find that, except when he puts on this half of the brain, and it's not numbered anymore. So this can come up because obviously we have all of our brain models. He can take them apart in half and give you the unnumbered half. All I want you guys to do is look for the 2 fingers. Okay, they look just like my fingers laying on there. They're pink and they're chubby. Okay, so we have these 2 fingers right here. Now in between those 2 gyri, we have this deep groove right here, the sulcus. That's going to be called once again the central sulcus. The central sulcus. What do we call the gyrus in front of the central sulcus? Precentral gyrus, and behind? Post-central gyrus. Okay? 3 more fingers on the temporal lobe right here, sitting along that. You have a superior, a middle, and an inferior temporal gyrus. Super straightforward. A superior, a middle, and an inferior temporal gyrus. Okay, so it's pretty much 3 fingers on the sides of your head like this. Okay, so you have 2 and you have 3, like conducting airplanes. Okay, so 3 on temporal, 2 on parietal. All right, the last thing I want you to know, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you because it's showed up on the exam before. I don't know if it's on your syllabus. I always say I don't know if it's on your syllabus. I could just check, but I don't. I do say that like all the time. So we have this little lobe right here on the very bottom of our frontal lobe. Okay, so this is the only one that I want you guys to worry about. It's all folded up on itself in a weird origami shape. It's not a nice straight line like all of these that we've already gone over. Okay, the way I find it is that it's got the letter or the symbol for pi in it. Okay, and I went ahead and drew that with pencil. So we have the symbol for pi. This lobe is called our inferior frontal lobe. Okay, so it's on the bottom of the frontal lobe. Yes, you have a middle and a superior, But all I want you guys to focus on is this inferior frontal lobe because it has shown up on the exam before. And I remember it showed up on my exam, I think, and my TA didn't go over it. So I was just like, eh. But that's your inferior frontal lobe. Inferior frontal lobe right there. Okay, so that's even more anterior than the precentral gyrus. Okay. Is everyone okay on the outside of the brain? What if the pin is here? What is this fissure called? Transverse. Good job, guys. What do we call the sulcus? Central sulcus. What do we call this fissure down the middle? Longitudinal fissure. Perfect. All right. So on the inside of the brain, right, we have a couple more fissures and sulcus that I want you guys to know up in this area, and then we're going to get into this fancy area down here, which is called our diencephalon. So all of this is called the telencephalon. All of this down here is called a diencephalon. You guys know me by now. I always say this. Dr. Sam hates regions, meaning that he doesn't point to the diencephalon asking you for the diencephalon. It's very difficult for him to do that. Okay, so the diencephalon, once again, is just this middle region here. Telencephalon is up there. The reason I'm telling you those terms is so when you're reading your lecture book, you can keep everything organized. All right, so back up here on the telencephalon, or our cerebrum, we have this lobe right here in the middle. If I were to trace on it with a pencil, it makes the letter W. Okay, kind of like this. All right, don't tell Sam I'm writing on his models, by the way. So we have this W right here. It all comes off with hand sanitizer. That's going to be called our paracentral lobe. Okay, so para reminds me of parietal, because we're still technically on that parietal lobe. Central makes sense, it's in the center. And then lobe, because it's just a little chunk of the brain. Okay, so we call it the paracentral lobe. Okay, paracentral lobe. Now behind the paracentral lobe, we have this section of the brain. Okay, if I write the letter P in it, all of that. If I were to outline it, I'm outlining it like this. So it looks like a letter P. And because it looks like a letter P, we're going to call it the precuneus. The precuneus. Okay, Precuneus. Precuneus. So that's called the precuneus. Then we're going to call the thing behind it the cuneus. So this is called the cuneus. So it's all of this. If I were to outline it, I would outline it just like this. So this little lobe area, it's not called a gyrus or a lobe, it's just called the cuneus. Cuneus. The cuneus. Okay. Now behind the cuneus, we have this little lobe right here. This is going to be a gyrus. It's called the lingual gyrus. So think of your tongue. Okay, it looks like a little tongue. We call it the lingual gyrus. The lingual gyrus. Okay, your lingual gyrus is cool. Fun fact, I mean, you don't need to know what it does. But the people who have, what's it called when you look at something and you remember it? Photographic memory, right? Photographic memory, that's easy. Photographic memory. It all comes from this guy. Okay, that's your lingual gyrus. It makes sense, it's in your occipital lobe that helps you see. A lot of your sight goes there. And if you have memory, really good memory, this lingual gyrus helps with that. Okay, so you can either blame it or love it. So you have this lingual gyrus. And then the last gyrus I want you to know is this one right here. It's this nice singular straight line. It's not curled up on itself at all. It doesn't really have any major folds. It's this singular fold right here. So we call it the cingulate gyrus. That starts with the letter C. Okay, so I know I'm saying single, but cingulate starts with the letter C. Like the really old phone company Singular before it became AT&T. That's how it's spelled. So cingulate gyrus. Cingulate gyrus. Okay, two more things I want you to know. They're going to be our sulci. The first one is this one. It's running in between the precuneus and the cuneus. What it's doing is it's separating the parietal lobe from the occipital lobe. So we call it the parieto-occipital sulcus. The parieto-occipital sulcus. Okay, so the parieto-occipital sulcus is right there. Right below it, if I turn it on the side, I have a reason for doing this. It makes the letter C. Okay, so we call this sulcus that makes the letter C the calcarine sulcus. Okay, the calcarine sulcus. My TA Neil likes to say it helps you do calculus. So it sounds like calculus, it's the calcarine sulcus. The calcarine sulcus. All right, whenever I studied anything in this class, I always organize things in little charts. For this area right up here, I used to say it's PPP, so paracentral lobe, precuneus, parieto-occipital sulcus. PPP. And we have C, cingulate, C, cuneus, C, calcarine sulcus. Okay, so PPP, CCC, L, just by default, lingual gyrus. Okay, so 3 P's, 3 C's, and an L. If you want to think of a saying, go for it. So paracentral lobe, precuneus, cuneus, lingual gyrus, cingulate gyrus, parieto-occipital sulcus, calcarine sulcus. Okay, I'm going to move on, and then I guess after a little bit of the diencephalon, we'll go back and we'll do like a little quiz on that area. All right, so moving downwards into the diencephalon, fancy term, it's fun to say. It's going to be this center area right here where we have a lot of communication going on between the two hemispheres of the brain. The first thing we're going to go over is this number 10 right here. Okay, it's made up of 10C, B, A, D, and 10. Just, it's one thing. Okay, I don't know why it's broken down into all these different areas. That's going to be further if you take neuroanatomy. So this whole thing right here is called the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum. It is a colossal, a massive piece of connective tissue that helps the two hemispheres of the brain fuse together. Okay, and there are a ton of structures in the body or in the brain that fuse the two hemispheres together. You will not be asked which of the following does not help connect the two hemispheres. That's not a question that you'll see in lab, okay? Can't say it for certain for lecture, but that's not something to worry about for lab. Okay, so corpus callosum is here. Please do not get that confused with the corpus cavernosus, which is the hard fibrous tissue of the penis. Dr. Samson has put corpus cavernosus as an answer choice, just to be me, okay? This is the corpus callosum. It is a colossal piece of connective tissue. It's not corpus cavernosus, that's in the penis. All right, so corpus callosum. Now, underneath the corpus callosum, we have this thing right here. It makes the letter D. Okay, once again, it's making that letter D. That's called our septum pellucidum. Our septum pellucidum. Pellucidum is not a fun word, I understand. I just called it septum. It worked for me. You'll be able to find it on the test. The reason why septum works so well is because if I were to show you a cross-section cut of the brain, so not this sagittal cut, an actual slice of the brain, which we have up here. Okay. By the way, guys, these will be on your test. Okay, at least like one of them. So make sure that you take a picture of these. They've been up here all semester. If you haven't noticed, this is where they come into play. So this is a cross-sectional cut of the brain. So that line right there in the middle, think of the septum of your nose. That's your septum pellucidum. It's kind of like the septum of your brain. Pretty cool. So once again, it's the septum pellucidum in the brain, just the septum in your nose, and it's that structure right there. When you guys are taking pictures of this, make sure you're taking pictures of both sides, because one side is blank, and this side is nice and labeled for you. So it's like a poster. Just make sure you're taking a picture of it. I'll leave it up here. When you guys are signing out, get this, like write it on your hand, get a picture of aquarium, okay, because it will show up maybe once, probably once on your test. Okay, that's 2 points, 2 easy points. So it'll be something very simple here in the middle. All right. So that's going to be called, once again, our septum pellucidum. Now, behind the septum pellucidum, you have this number 12. That number 12 is called your fornix. Okay, it's called your fornix. F-O-R-N-I-X. Pretty similar to the fornix, like spelling-wise, that we saw in the uterus. Okay, so there are a lot of repeating terms that we have so far. Corpus callosum sounds like corpus cavernosus. We have a fornix in our brain. I cannot tell you what the fornix does because I never learned. Dr. Samson doesn't want you to know the function of the fornix. If you read your lecture book, it says, right here is the fornix, and it has like an arrow, and that's all it says about it. So 12 is the fornix. Behind the fornix is number 26, this pink thing. I can't tell you what that does. That's called your choroid plexus. And remember, Frankie was just going over this. You have a choroid layer in your eye. Every time you think of the word choroid, I want you guys to think of vasculature. Vasculature is a fancy way of saying arteries and veins. Okay, so vessels. So we call this the choroid plexus. The reason it's called the choroid plexus, which means vascular, is because you have an arterial network right here, which means that you have a plexus, hence choroid plexus, you have a plexus of arteries. Because you have all that blood supply and all that innervation going to this little structure in the brain, it allows it to make a very, very special fluid. What's that fluid called? Good job, guys. Cerebral spinal fluid, or CSF, comes from that choroid plexus. Okay, so because we have that giant network of arteries, it's going to be called the choroid plexus. It makes CSF. CSF obviously flows through the brain. We have these open hollow spaces and then flows through the spinal column. All right, so behind the fornix, very small, hard to see. That little thing right there, it's a little raised area, like a little hair. Ooh, I'm sorry. There we go. That's called our habenula. The habenula. Okay, so I'm coloring it gray. That's the habenula. All right, I used to call it the habanero because it couldn't say anything, and it worked. You can always find it on the test. Okay, so if you want to call it the habanero instead of the habenula, you'll be able to find the answer. All right, so the little tiny hair is the habenula. It extends backwards to number 23 right there. Okay, this guy right there. Little number 23 is called the pineal body. Okay, again, it's called the pineal body. The pineal body is really cool because it produces the absolute best hormone in the world, melatonin, which makes you sleepy. Okay, so the pineal body, that's what it's in charge of. It produces melatonin, also serotonin, which helps make you happy. Okay, that's coming from this pineal body right here. Okay, once again, the pineal body. Right in front of the pineal body, it looks just like it. Don't get these confused. This one is more circular. It's not teardrop shaped anymore. It's called the posterior commissure. Okay, it's called the posterior commissure. Okay, we learned this when we went over the spinal column. If I can find one. A commissure is a fancy way of saying a bridge. Okay, so here we have a picture of the spinal column. You guys remember the gray commissure? No, that's too bad because this is going to be on your test.
Yeah.
We have the gray commissure right here. Make sure you know your spinal column. This model, any model that I showed you from the first unit, is fair game for this next test. Okay, I don't want to freak you out. We can go over it at the end if you guys want to stay for that. I'll let you guys give you the option to sign out, and I'll just kind of do it up here while you guys are leaving. But also know it in a cadaver. Okay, so if you see a cadaver of the spinal column, make sure you understand that. All right, so what I was trying to get at is that we have the gray commissure right here. A commissure is a bridge. It's going to bridge the right and the left sides of the spinal column together. So the posterior commissure in the brain right there is going to help bridge the two hemispheres. All right, and if we're taking the time out of our life to call this a posterior commissure, that means we probably have an anterior commissure and it's right here. Okay, so that little number 9 right there is going to be our anterior commissure. Okay, so think of them like little screws in the brain. You have one in the back, one in the front, and they screw the two hemispheres together. Okay, once again, it's the anterior commissure, the posterior commissure, and the pineal body. The pineal body is more long. It looks more like a teardrop. All right, here in the middle, this area right here, this is called our thalamus. Okay, that open area right there, it's kind of all pinkish. That's called our thalamus. The thalamus can be broken up depending on where it is, meaning are we pointing to the top of the thalamus, the middle / bottom portion of the thalamus, or way below the thalamus? Okay, so we're going to call number 19 the epithalamus. So I want you to think of your epidermis. It's the top layer of your skin. The epithalamus is the top layer of our thalamus. Number 20, right there, is called the subthalamus. Okay, so think of a subway. It's right underground. So that's going to be called our subthalamus, which means that 21 is going to be called our hypothalamus. Okay, so hypo, way below. Sub, right directly underneath. Epi, on top. Epi, sub, hypothalamus. Okay, epi, sub, hypothalamus. And then right here in the middle, we have a little number 22. That little number 22 is super annoying because it has 2 names. They're not super easy names. The first name I want you guys to know for that is the interthalamic adhesion. Okay, it's called the interthalamic adhesion. It will make sense if you break it down. Interthalamic, it is in between the two hemispheres. Okay, it's in between the two hemispheres which both have a thalamus. Okay, so here and here. Right, so interthalamic adhesion, it's adhesive. It's like someone put some tape in the middle of the brain and holds it together. Interthalamic adhesion. Okay, the other name I want you guys to know is the intermediate mass. That one's a little bit easier. It's just a mass in between the two brains. Okay, so intermediate mass. Interthalamic adhesion, bubble that in, bubble an intermediate mass as well. All right? All right, so if the pen, let's do a quick review of what we've done so far. If the pen is here on this pink thing, what is it? Choroid plexus, good job guys. What about 12? Fornix, yeah, that one's always hard for me to remember when I took this class because I had no idea what it does. I still don't know what it does. It's called the fornix. If anyone knows, you can school me on it. What is this little hair right there called? The habanero. It's called our habanula. The habanula. Okay, it extends all the way back to this cool guy that makes melatonin. That's going to be the pineal body. Right in front of the pineal body is this thing called the posterior commissure, which would make this the anterior commissure. Think of your nose for this one. What is that space? Septum pellucidum. Good job. So think of just septum. Okay, just thinking of septum is good enough. What is number 10? Subtissue. Corpus callosum. It is a colossal piece of connective tissue. What do we call 19? Epithalamus, which makes 20 the subthalamus, which makes 21 the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus will be your best friend / enemy when you take endocrinology because it has a whole bunch to do with hormones. All right, what do we call this gyrus right here? No folds. Cingulate gyrus. Good job. It is a single line. It is a cingulate gyrus. This one that's in the center. Paracentral lobe or lobular. Good job. The one that makes a P. Precuneus, which makes this one the cuneus. What's this gyrus right here called? Lingual gyrus. Perfect. What do we call this sulcus that separates the parietal lobe from the occipital lobe? Parieto-occipital sulcus. And what about this last one right here? Calcarine sulcus. Okay, remember, think of calculus. Okay, calcarine sulcus. Good job, guys. All right, so underneath here, this bottom portion underneath the hypothalamus, we got a little party going on. The first thing I want you to know is going to be this cool gland right here. It hangs off like a little bean. I'll probably break it off. I've broken 3 brains this week. It comes off really easily, okay? We got super glue. So we have this little thing that dangles underneath the brain right here. It's called your pituitary gland. Okay, your pituitary gland, I think I said this yesterday to my class. I either said it yesterday or Monday. I could spend the rest of this lab talking about this gland because it does so much. There are certain hormones it releases. It has 2 lobes. Each lobe is in charge of different hormones. There are fancy hormones called your antidiuretic hormone that you guys are going to read about in your lecture book that helps with like thirst and everything. You need to know any of that. At least not for lab. All I want you to know is that number 25 is your pituitary gland. That's it. Don't worry about the lobes for it. The pituitary gland is really cool. We can relate this back to Unit 2 because it sits in something called the sella turcica. You guys remember that? It's Cowboy Ross's saddle. If you don't remember it, it's not a big deal because you don't need to know it, but that's why it kind of dangles off there and you have that indent in the brain. Nestled in that hard bone saddle is going to be the pituitary gland. Now dangling or suspending that pituitary gland into that sella turcica is this white string. That white string is going to be called our pituitary stalk. S-T-A-L-K, like a corn stalk. Another name for the pituitary stalk, it is a synonym. It's going to be your infundibulum. Okay, remember we heard that term in the fallopian tube. Okay, so another name for the pituitary stalk is the infundibulum. It's this white string right here. So Dr. Sam would somehow tape the pen like that. Okay, so pituitary stalk or infundibulum. Behind the pituitary gland and the stalk is number 24. It's this perfect round circle. I call it the booby of the brain. It's called your mammillary body. Okay, the reason I call it the booby of the brain is because if we look at the underneath view, they make little boobies on the bottom of your brain. So those are your mammillary bodies. Okay, mammillary bodies. Perfect circles right there. You have one on each hemisphere. The mammillary bodies. Okay, so that's the mammillary body. In front of the pituitary gland, however, you have this thing, which I'm going to color because you can't see it well because it's not numbered. It's this thing right here. Okay, that flat surface area is called our optic chiasm. Okay, optic chiasm. Now the optic chiasm, we went over the word commissure, which means bridge. Chiasm technically means bridge also. Okay, so we have this optic chiasm. It is representing where we have the optic nerve, which is our cranial nerve 2, like Frankie went over. Cranial nerve 2, it crosses underneath the brain. Okay, so specifically on the cross, on the X, that's called the optic chiasm. Dr. Sam wants most specific. If it's pinned, you're only going to bubble an optic chiasm. You're not going to bubble in optic nerve, cranial nerve 2, optic chiasm. I just want optic chiasm from you guys. Okay, and you guys know me, I'll tell you otherwise. So we have the optic chiasm right there, and it's going to be part of cranial nerve 2. Okay, the cool thing about the optic chiasm, why it exists, is that if information is taken from the left eye, some of it will be sent to the right side of the brain, some from the right eye will be sent to the left brain because you have those nerves crossing. It's a cool fact that you don't really need to know much about or how it works for lab. There is a picture diagram in your book explaining how that actually works. I would maybe study that for your lecture final, but for lab, which is next week, don't worry about it. Okay, so just know that if that's pointed to, it's the optic chiasm. It is the bridge or the crossing of the optic nerve. All right, so behind there, okay, this is where I usually lose a lot of students. 31, okay, this straight edge right here is called the tectal plate. Okay, so if you see the pin there on that flat bottom, not the two bumps sitting on top of it, not this bump or this bump, this flat surface right there, that's called the tectal plate. Okay, now in the brain you have 4 gems. Okay, 4 gems that attach to that tectal plate, which means on each hemisphere we have 2. Okay, so this top gem, okay, is going to be called our superior colliculus. The superior colliculus. Okay, which means the bottom one right here is called the inferior colliculus. The inferior colliculus. Okay, so you have 4 of them. You have 2 superior and 2 inferior. And together, those colliculi, it's plural, make up something called the corpora quadrigemini. Okay, you see why I lose a lot of people here? They're just like, I don't think she's speaking anymore. So we have the superior and the inferior colliculi. We have 2 on each side. Together, they make something called the corpora quadrigemini. From the back posterior view of the brainstem, it looks like this. Okay, so this is just an extracted brainstem. These 2 circles right here, the 2 green circles, okay, those are your superior colliculi. Your superior colliculi. These below it that look like teardrops, those are the inferior colliculi. Together, all 4 of them make up the 4 gems of the brain, the corpora quad for 4, gemini for gem. Okay, so the corpora quadrigemini. And they're literally sitting attached to that tectal plate. Okay, so the tectal plate is like a piece of paper, and a 4-year-old comes up with a bunch of cotton balls and glues them on. Okay, so I'll show you what these like gems are. They're just kind of stuck there on the brain. They have a function. They help interpret like auditory and sight, but you don't need to